Welcome to Blue Collar Conversations and our final night of conference. We're here at the Boar in Westminster, and tonight I've brought on the big guns for the final show. We've got here the co-founder of the Blue Collar Conservative movement, that is Clark Vasey, and we've also brought back by popular demand, mainly by his colleagues because they wanted Friday night off, and that is Paul Baldwin from The Express. And this is a part of the show where we talk about what you've had to say in your opinions, and trust me, you've had a lot to say about Margaret Ferrier. She is the SNP MP who, knowing that she had COVID, travelled on public transport, and people are saying, like Ray Booty, we need to sack her, remove her, she needs the full force of the law to come down on her. But we'll be talking about that a little bit later on. Now, we've just heard from the Chancellor, and I asked him, is the Conservative Party still the party of the self-employed and small businesses? Clark, as co-founder of the Blue Collar movement, are we?
I don't want to get myself in trouble, but we've got to be, because if we're not the party for people who are working hard like that, then really what are we? And yeah, I think we're right to ask ourselves that question now because, small businesses have had the worst of this crisis and, are looking ahead. They're not sure about what's coming next. We need to show them that we're on their side in the future. They've been through a lot. We've got to start thinking about where they go next. We'll get a lot of talk about when we start talking about things like tax cuts to help these businesses out and saying, can it be afforded? Well, actually, these guys have already paid the price of it, and we've got to get as much tax off these guys, get them back to doing business, because it's the restrictions they don't want. They want to do their business. They're not after state handouts. We need to be getting back, cutting their taxes, getting back to normal. That means probably looking to Sweden as quickly as possible, getting these businesses operating as normal. That's what we need to be doing, and that will prove that with the party of small business.
And I have to be honest, going round the country at the start of the year, I can't tell you how many people said to me this was going to be their best year ever. They'd had sort of delays, and they'd had all the Brexit, and then Brexit had been completed the 31st of January, and all money that had maybe been held up, or orders for goods that had been delayed were now coming forward. So they weren't expecting, basically, the government to close their business down. So there's nothing that these businesses have done wrong. There was nothing wrong with the businesses. It wasn't that they weren't profitable. Because of the pandemic, we closed them down. And we've got to take responsibility for that, haven't we?
Absolutely. We in Britain, we are brilliant at being entrepreneurial. And we're going to need this post-Brexit more than ever before, as far as I'm concerned. And as you say, prior to the to lockdown, I was talking to space companies. We think Britain has space companies. We do. We have in Scotland makes more than a third of the world's satellites, which is mind-blowing, really, that sort of stuff. Today, don't want to bang on about Blackburn again, but two guys in Blackburn who opened a garage about 30 years ago bought Asda today, and that's a spirit of that's an entrepreneurial spirit, a magnificent effort, and they now employ 32,000 people, I think it is, and now with Asda, I don't know, so many thousands more, and that is going to be so vital to the recovery of this nation. And can we afford it? We can't not afford it. We cannot not afford it. Whatever we need to do to keep that spirit of entrepreneurialism and business going, then we need to do. And if that is cut, we're going to have to think. We're going to have to come up with some clever ideas. And Rishi might be the man because he's not put a foot wrong really so far. But breaks on national insurance, breaks on other business taxes. It's going to have to happen to keep that business going.
I think if we don't support these businesses and the forgotten limited group that represents 2 million businesses and employing several million more people, you have to say, would you really want to set up a business now? Would then we be killing off the age of the entrepreneur? If people felt, well, I tried everything, I've put my heart and soul into this for however many years, it's been closed down fundamentally because of the pandemic, and I think that's what we've got to be mindful of. We cannot stop as you say, that entrepreneurial spirit, because that brings, I think it's like 270 billion into our economy, all those people giving it a go. And we're always a nation of shopkeepers, weren't we, having a go. Well, look, I know some of you might have seen the Rishi interview a little bit earlier on, but here's just a small clip of what he had to say.
We always have been the party of small business, and rightly so, right? There's nothing more admirable than people giving up that security of the regular paycheck to take a risk and do something entrepreneurial, put in all those tough hours when it's not going so well at the beginning to build something great. And that's what my mum did, and it's something I've got enormous admiration for.
And when we think about how we're going to help these companies, it wasn't that they did anything wrong. When some people weren't eligible for support because they paid themselves by dividends, that was legal. They were allowed to do that. Their accountants had done their books that way. I think we've got to be mindful of that, and then looking forward, even if we couldn't help them earlier on in the year, looking forward for what we can do.
I think we've got to, that's why we were talking about tax cuts. That's why we've got to look at tax cuts, because if we get to the idea of state dependency for companies have got a lot of money off the state at the moment. It's kept a lot of them going, and more of them are likely to come out the other side because of it. Not all of them will, but if you are encouraging these businesses to be more dependent on the state, what is the state going to do for me? What more money is government going to give me? Then you are hammering away at that entrepreneurial spirit as well. Because you go into business to make the money for yourself, because you want to take the risks and you want to have the rewards. You don't do it because you think I'm owed a living by the government. So as soon as we get back to that, getting the state off their backs, getting the taxes off them, allowing them, because don't forget the economy isn't what money the government has, it's what people are producing. And if we get the businesses going, then we're going to grow that economy. That's going to mean more tax revenues. So we've got to be lowering taxes. We've got to be getting back to our principles and our values, to be allowing the businesses to really go for it, create the jobs, and that's what's going to turn around this country.
And that is the key thing, isn't it? The government doesn't have money. It is the wealth creators who create the money for us. And I think that's why the lockdown and the curfews and certain areas not being able to do what they should be doing. They say now with this 10 o'clock curfew, a quarter of our pubs might disappear. That's billions and billions of pounds we're losing. And it's not just money, it is about going out, it is about socialising, it is about having fun, it is doing what human beings do. But you were amazed, Paul, that when there was a vote in the House the other day, and you said the more you thought about it, the more angry you were, that some say, no, you can't just have draconian laws pushed through. You MPs must vote on it and have a debate on it.
I was almost as apoplectic as Lindsay Hoyle this morning, actually. I don't know if you saw him, but I'm indeed over that matter. It felt absolutely spineless that a lot of these backbenchers who've been giving it a big talk for days and days and days about we must have a say in the decision-making process, just keeled up, with the exception of your good self and your less better.
Oh, hang on a second. Better half. What's going on?
Your other half.
That's why I've separated you. That's why he's not here tonight, because I could see you were going to gang up on me and you got Clark instead.
The very idea, Esther. No, I think you said there were 6 MPs who
from the Conservative Party, and there were some from the Labour Party. But did you know the Labour Party were on a 3-line whip to abstain? So it's like Labour. Now this to me does remind me a little bit of Brexit. The biggest issue of the day, and Labour didn't have an opinion and they've abstained. Well, surely COVID lockdowns, whether you're having laws pushed through without people voting on them, surely that's the biggest decisions of the day. And I'm afraid Keir and Labour have decided they're going to abstain from all of this, because fundamentally they do agree with lockdowns.
To a non-politician, the whole thing looked absolutely spineless on both sides of the house, I have to say, and it seems vital to me and the man or woman on the Clapham Omnibus, I think, that the decisions have to be seen to be taken in public, and the more minds you can get around that decision, the better. You do not want what we've got at the moment, which is a small cabal making decisions in secret. It's like the Politburo. It's not good for democracy, and it's not good for faith in the system. And faith in the system, where coronavirus is concerned right now, is becoming increasingly vital, because people are just stopping believing the stuff that's coming out of Number 10. and flouting the law as a matter of
And
course.
I think it's the arbitrary nature. So why 10 o'clock and not 10:30 or 11 o'clock? People don't really understand that. I mean, to be fair, when I was speaking to the Chancellor, I said, you do be listening to us, be in listening mood, and if things need to change, you do know that you're going to have to do that. And to be fair, he said, yes, we will, and we know that. Because, restaurateurs have said to me, Esther, we now definitely need 2 sittings because you're only allowing about 60-70% of the people in the restaurant because of social distancing. So if we don't have 2 sittings and closing at 10 will probably mean we only have 1 sitting, we can't survive.
Yeah, and that doesn't just mean those businesses, that means those jobs as well. Because it is the wealth contributors that create the economy that we use for our taxes, but it's also, working people as well. We all pay our taxes. And there's more of those people who are, unfortunately, not going to be able to do that and have those jobs to come back to unless we start thinking about what do we do to get us back to normal, to where we need to be, because that's what we need, We've got to sort of take on the challenge of the virus in front of us, but we've also got to get back to normal, learn how to live with it if needs be, get the economy moving, because people's livelihoods are going to be upended by this. That is going to destroy lives, and we shouldn't be downplaying the human cost of not getting back to normal.
And then the poll we had, still on the theme of COVID, was, do you think there is one rule for them and one rule for us when it comes to sort of COVID and the rules that are being laid down? And actually that poll came back and people said, yes, we do. Express readers said, yes, we do. We think 94% of them said, yes, there is one rule for them and one rule for us. And do you think that's coming across now? So when they see an SNP MP, Margaret Ferrier, who, could you believe it, she thought she was getting COVID, so much so that she took a test, but she decided to come down to London, go to Parliament, speak to everybody. Then she had it confirmed she was positive and she got on a train and went back to Scotland. I mean, that's unbelievable.
It is the worst possible case of do as I do and not as I say. Do as I say and not as I do. This is a woman who, not only was, sort of a cheerleader for, the kind of draconian measures and lockdowns, but she, knew she was at risk. She knew that she had it. With all of we can all have different views about masks and, how much to lock down. But if you've got it, you've got it. And for her to have done that was unconscionable. To put other people at risk. And especially with given what she supposedly believed about the lockdown.
And what do you think? Would it have been different if she'd have been an MP who voted against it all, who didn't agree with it, who hadn't maybe been calling for other people to lose the job? Would there have been a difference if she'd have been an MP who said, I don't believe with this COVID restrictions?
I don't think your political point of view on COVID counts for anything. She knew what she was doing. It's a whole. Nicola Sturgeon went straight in and said, "Oh yeah, it's just like Dominic Cummings, isn't it? Trying to make some political capital out of it." It's not. It's so much worse than Dominic Cummings, because she knew she was infected. She knew she was a carrier, and she got on a train from London to Scotland, and she just didn't care. And that is, as Lindsay Hoyle said, it was reckless. I think that's putting it really lightly.
I was going to say, you don't have to.
Criminal.
You don't have to be a lawmaker in any way here. I mean, this is common sense, wasn't it? You have the infection, therefore you don't pass it on. I mean, that's what this was about, wasn't it? This was passing it on.
There's a lot of people who are now talking more about looking to Sweden. Sweden has a different approach to this virus, but it's not a free-for-all. It's not like you've got COVID, go knock yourselves out, you can just go anywhere. There are sensible restrictions on people. And if you know that you have tested positive for an infectious virus, getting on a train is literally one of about the one thing you ought not to be doing. I'm just going to sort of, on the way to the station, the train, on the way to where I live, I'm going to put all these people at risk because, well, I don't care because I'm more important.
And I mean, the Express readers also brought up, Corbyn having his party for 9 people.
Yeah.
Now, you might say there's a difference there. One was you knew you were infected, The other one, you're still breaking the law because there's a price to pay, there's a £200 penalty. But, is there a difference there? Are other people breaking the law like that? We did a poll with Express readers last night and they said 60% of people they felt weren't abiding by the law. But is there a difference there, what Corbyn was doing?
I think there is a difference between Corbyn's dinner party and what Ferrier did. What Ferrier did was unconscionable, absolutely. What Corbyn did was in breach of the law. And what annoyed me this morning was the Met, who have cast iron proof that all those people around that table were in breach of the law and thus should be slapped with a £200 fine. And the Met said, we're not doing anything about this. And two things annoyed me. Why? It plays absolutely into us and them, that there's one rule for them and one rule for us. Because if it was my mates, you could guarantee there'd be 200 quid lighter tonight. But the other thing is, it would have made a fantastic example, and it would have become a sort of, we don't want to get Corbyn to do it because it would be it would go into the public consciousness that the rule of six is the rule of six. It's not the rule of nine.
And interesting, I thought Corbyn's case was interesting on two levels. One, you've just said they're not being pursued for that money, so there's one law for them and there's one law for us. And I also thought, there's another level here for one rule for them and one rule for me. If you can afford that £200 and it doesn't matter to you, well, there's a rule for them and a rule for us. I mean, if that £200 means a lot, you could not break the law. There's an element of you can break the law if you've got the money to be able to break the law as well. So I feel we're splitting between lots of them and us. And so that whole thing that, you'd say, the UK... Britain is founded on is the rule of law, that nobody is above it and we are all the same under it. This to me is breaking that down. That's why I feel so sad about it.
I mean, I think for me, I'm probably not the biggest fan of the whole idea of shopping your neighbours during the course of this, and I don't sort of necessarily agree with some of the rules that are in place now, but I think you do have abide by them. It always reminds me of that scene in The Untouchables, where Elliot Ness has spent all that time enforcing the prohibition on alcohol, and then they come up to him at the end of it when he's just defeated Al Capone and said, "Oh, Mr. Ness have just legalised alcohol. What do you think you're going to do now?" He says, "I think I'm going to take a drink." So I think that there is an element that we do have to live by it, by sort of whether or not we agree with them or not. That is what the law is. But I think it is a classic socialist thing. It is literally, they are the people who say one thing that's different for them, and everything, they know the effect is going to be different on other people. Socialism is going to impoverish people, but it's okay. I can say it from my, sort of palatial home in North London, because, I can afford a bit of socialism. It's only the rich who can afford socialism. After all, the rest of us just have to sort of have shades of Soviet Russia if Corbyn had ever got his way.
No,
I think it's just classic from him.
Well, as we've always said, that statism is telling you what to do, whereas we believe in you having a say and everybody having a say. And I think this, I don't know if you saw the Sean Bailey interview a little bit earlier on, but he was talking about the red wall maybe falling in London, and he said, it's in the mind. So let's hear what Sean said a little bit earlier on.
We'll be able to break the red wall. The red wall is not a place, it's a state of mind. We can break the red wall down here in the south just in the same way we did in the north.
It's about a can-do attitude. It's about going out there and working hard, and that's what he's saying. The red wall could be smashed down with that attitude, and Sadiq is the person who's probably going to help that red wall collapse in London.
I'm not convinced. I think the London thing is a kind of schism at the heart of the Labour Party that always has been there, which is the Labour Party came out of the trade union movement and was a kind of valiant and noble effort to level the playing field, right? to level up, the kind of thing Boris wants to do again 200 years later. But then it was kind of hijacked by the rich noblesse oblige academics who wanted to use the workers, who were the real Labour Party, as kind of lab rats for their social experiments. And that kind of mentality still remains. If you look at the higher echelons of the Labour Party, who all send their kids to private schools, by the way, and live in Islington and live a different life to, people in Blackburn and Grimsby or Hull or whatever.
I always think it's those who are studying the working class, don't understand it, wouldn't know if they fell over it, but they'd like to pontificate about it because they read this in a book about how those people live.
It's exactly that, yeah. But I think that Islington, I lived in Islington for a while. Jeremy Corbyn was my MP for a while. That is so part of London life. It's not going to change, I don't think, anytime soon, unless London changes.
Because, when you talk about, I think the first red wall that collapsed was in sort of outside London, your Essexes in the 1980s. That was the first red wall to collapse, wasn't it? The next one was sort of 2019 up north, but that was the, aspirational working class, as you say, wanting to set up. Success was a positive thing, set up their own businesses, sort of where you live out that way, isn't it?
So I think, I think Sean is right when he says the red wall was a state of mind, and it was a state of mind that had to be gotten over. And places like Essex, sort of clearly moved a long time ago, and now you can't see the Labour Party making great inroads anytime soon. But we set this our little blue collar conservatism group back up in 2013, and I remember sort of sitting in events where we were talking about the North is going to throw off the Labour Party, and this, you sat in sort of Brexit wasn't even a word that had been invented, and I'm sitting there and I'm saying that the Labour Party will be kicked out of the North. It will happen, and I think I had to check myself. Do I really believe that? Because this was a time, and I thought to myself, yes, I do, because there were not people were being taken for granted. People were not being properly represented. This was the social experiments of a North London Labour Party.
I remember
from the North.
We'd be having like dinners and chats and drinks and this, that, and the other, and we didn't know when it was going to happen. We just could see it was happening. So if I would look at the opposite side of the bench as the sort of Labour Party, then I'm thinking, God, you really don't represent them whatsoever. But I didn't know when that change was going to happen. You could see the sort of slow ebbing away of that Labour vote from those seats.
In 2010, throughout the Labour Party, I'd grown up with sort of Labour. It was Eric Martlew stickers adorned every sort of road crossing in the city. Every lamppost you'd have Eric Martlew stickers. This was a red town, and it kicked the Labour Party out in 2010. A piece of the red wall punched through long before the rest. So it was happening.
But is it going to happen in London?
Look, I mean, London is a challenge, because I think if you talk about the Essex piece, there's clearly seats in Essex that were historically Labour but now solid Conservative. But there are seats in London that, of the same period, have made that move from being would have been a Conservative seat back in the 80s to now. So there is a real.
Well, look, we've had Boris. So we've had a Conservative mayor here. We've now got Sadiq. People don't seem happy with what Sadiq's doing, what he's doing to what is an incredible global capital here. So will he get kicked out? Sean Bailey's definitely the guy. He's out there, he's seeing people, he's got this drive, but will it change anytime soon, Paul?
I think it's different. The in the north, they certainly where I grew up, I was in Blackburn. The people aren't really massively partisan. What they want is a fair shake, and they will vote for the party that gives them a fair shake. That's the main sort of political feeling. Whereas in London, it's not that. It's much more. They think if we vote Labour in the north, we get up in the morning and sing the Internationale or something. And we don't. It's not like that, lads. But they've never been north, so they wouldn't know. But it's more, they choose their socialism like they choose to eat edamame beans or something like that, or it's not. It's a lifestyle choice for them,
I mean, to speak up a bit for London. I don't think it's all like there is a clique that runs the Labour Party that sit there in their comfortable North London settings and want to set this for everybody else. Where I think that Sean has a real chance is that whether it's the red wall mindset or whatever, Sadiq is running London into the ground. There is tough times because of COVID. And this is a guy who's making the wrong calls on everyone. This is a man who's pushing it further and further down. So I don't think there's going to be a lot of people outside of the
is he
North
saying
London dinner
anything
parties.
at the moment to get London open back up? I come and get off the train at Euston and I'll go to get a taxi, and I am shocked. Now, a taxi's waiting 2 hours at Euston. Usually they'd be whooshing through and collecting people up. They'll say, I might have a couple of fares a day. They're saying, why would people come into London if the theatre's not open, if the restaurants aren't really open? They're having a really tough time. Is he out there championing the city, cheering it, shouting for it to do well and get back on its feet? Because I don't hear him.
The only message that seems to have come out of Sadiq so far is London's knackered. Get used to it.
No way.
And Sean wrote this in a piece a few weeks ago, and put the cat among the pigeons a bit. But there's a sort of deafening silence coming out of from the Sadiq camp at the moment, and it's not.
Look, for most of us who don't live in London all the time, I've always seen London really in a country in its own right. It is so different from the rest of the country, and great for it. The capital of finance, the capital probably of the law, capital of the sort of media, the political heartland as well. So it really is an engine for the whole of the country, and we should be proud of that. We just want the regions to also be able to prosper in their own ways. But for somebody to say, basically, oh, who cares, get used to it, it's,
It was the get used to it.
Get used to it. That is so wrong. He should be out there championing it, because around the globe, it is looked on as a global capital and, probably envied in a way, London. Crikey, if he can't champion this place, I am shocked. He needs to be booted out if he can't champion this absolute global capital.
Look, you can't deny that London, is an engine of the country, and Sadiq is no Fred Dibner. He's not a guy getting this working. He should be at the coalface, demanding this city is opened up as much as it possibly can be, getting people back to work. And I think that's where Sean's chance comes in, because he's asleep at the wheel. And it's running off the road. I don't know what metaphors I'm using now, but
all of them, I'd say,
I'd say
in one sentence.
Sean can do it, because Sadiq, you can't imagine a man to have let down a city more than what he's doing right now in London.
Well, I'm going to hear voice of the people. We're going, who would you have at your cabinet, or in your cabinet, I should say, who isn't a politician? This is what voice of the people have to say.
If I could have anyone in the cabinet who wasn't a politician, he's actually died, but it would be Les Dawson, because I think he was witty, funny, but also was sharp. He had a good head on him.
If I could have anyone in my cabinet that wasn't a politician, I'd probably choose Jeremy Clarkson, because I think he's quite funny and has good views.
Les Dawson, I like that one. So, who would yours be?
If I could see anyone in the cabinet, so the first person that springs to mind is Swedish epidemiologist Anders Tegnell. However, and that seems a little bit too political. For
He's
it.
the first person that springs to mind.
These are the times we live in.
All right.
So what I'm going to say is my final answer. Who I'd like to see is my personal hero, Roger Daltrey, lead singer of the Who.
You took a joke from me. I was going to say who, and you could have said lead singer of.
And absolutely Brexiteer, a man who's never lost touch with his working class roots, greatest frontman ever to have lived. Imagine him around the cabinet table.
Fantastic, Paul.
I would have. I'm trying to think of something witty, but I actually think I would have some proper people in the cabinet. I'd have the taxi driver who brought me here tonight. It was brilliant.
I bet you he had an opinion on a couple of things.
Absolutely right. And obviously he was a taxi driver, so he was right. And I'd have the bloke who sells me my coffee in the morning, right? Small businessman, talks to people, knows what's going on in real life, sort of thing. I'd have a cabinet full of proper people, not necessarily people who just went to Eton and Harrow and.
You see, so that's where I was coming from, where you were coming from, and I'd have to say somebody like my dad, who'd say we need to knock a few heads together here. Do you not know how, he'd say, the other half lives? Do you not understand what it's like to get up at this time in the morning and find this is working or that isn't working? So I'm afraid Jim McVey
No,
which have a lot to
he's got
say
my
at that
vote.
cabinet table. Has he got your vote as well?
Look, I know Jim. I'd vote for him all day long.
Dad, you got 3 votes here. You're
Yeah,
all right. You never know.
absolutely, yeah.
Wait for that phone call. You could be in running the country before you know it. Now, look, we're coming to the end of what has been a fantastic week. At least we think so. I hope you've enjoyed it. It's been our Blue Collar Conservatism Conference. In fact, we'd like to have some feedback from you. Let us know what you liked, and also let us know what maybe you didn't like. We've had some great support, some great help, and obviously the Blue Boar here have been really accommodating and looked after us. So it's goodbye from us, but actually we're going to show some of the highlights on the Express website over the weekend. Enjoy.